and thank you for joining us. I'm Laurel Westendorf, part of the Community Relations team at the Deschutes Public Library. Today's presentation, in partnership with Central Oregon Community College, is Let's Talk About Race, Normalizing Race Conversations with Christy Walker. Christy Walker is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Central Oregon Community College. Her former role at the college was as the Latinx College Preparation Program Coordinator. She is an active committee member and chair of the Central Oregon Latino Partnership Program, the current facilitator for the Latinx Success Initiative, a committee member for the LGBTQ Education Work Group, and is on the HECC Equity Advisory Council. She facilitates several trainings on equity, diversity, and inclusion for COCC and the Central Oregon community. We are grateful for her contribution to continuing these important conversations in the community.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christy Walker. My pronouns are she, her, and Aya, and I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Central Oregon Community College. And I'm here today to try to engage in conversation with you all. And I just first wanted to thank the Deschutes Public Library for giving me this opportunity to use this platform to be able to talk about some of these important issues. And the real focus about this talk today is about normalizing race conversations. And, first, when trying to think about what I wanted to talk about, normalizing is kind of a loaded word. And I just wanted to start by saying that because what is normal, right? And we often hear a lot of people saying, oh, we wish we should go back to normal. And back to normal for who, right? The good old days for who? And I think it's important to make those distinctions and to think about that when we throw out words like that. And so normalizing for me, really in this context, is meant to be more of making it a part of our everyday, making it something that we are used to so that it's not so taboo to talk about these things. And while talking about race can be very difficult for some folks, the time has come for us not to be afraid to speak about these things anymore. The time has come for us to be able to really engage in thoughtful conversation so that we can start to make some changes. And so when you hear the word normal in these circumstances, it's really important to me that you understand that that's what we're talking about as far as normalizing something, because going back to normal is taking steps backwards. And that's just my personal feelings on that. And so, I know that these talks are really meant to be engaging and interactive. And so I'm going to do the best that I can to just carry on a conversation with you all and hopefully have some thought-provoking moments for you. So the first thing that I want to do is there's this really powerful exercise that one of my colleagues taught me or presented to me, and it's called the Trusted Six. And so what I'm going to ask for you all to do is just take a moment. And it actually would probably be very helpful if you had a piece of paper to write things down, but you don't have to. You're definitely welcome to just kind of think it through. And I'm going to go ahead and give a few pauses here and there just to make sure that you have a chance and the opportunity to be able to think about this. And so what I want you to do is make a list of about 6 people, okay? And if you don't have 6 people, that's okay. But do the best that you can. And what I want you to think about is when you think about somebody that you trust, someone that's in your inner circles, and not including your family. So I'm going to ask that you move away from your family and from those obvious choices, or maybe they're not obvious, but from those choices. And think about who in your life is someone that you really trust and that you engage with and that is, again, a part of your life in a meaningful way. And just take a few moments, and you don't have to write their names out. You don't have to, you can put initials, or even if it's a characteristic, whatever, this is for you. You won't be asked to turn this in at the end of class. And once you have those names down, then I want you to start thinking about different aspects of identity. And go ahead and write these down as well in a separate headings. And think about gender, nationality, native language, accent, age, ethnicity, professional background, religion, education. Okay, and once you have those written down, then I want you to look through that list and put a little tick mark next to all the aspects of identity that you've chosen of this person that you trust that are the same as yours. And you can take a moment to think about this. Now, as you're looking at that list, what are you noticing? Chances are that the tick marks that you've put are similar to what you would say for yourself. And the reason being is that as human beings, we tend to surround ourselves with people that are like us, right? When you seek out a partner, a lot of times you're looking for someone that you're going to connect with that has similar interests, similar things like that. But try to think about that a little bit further. Why? Is there any diversity on your list? Or are people really very similar to you? Have you been given the opportunity? Or actually more so, have you sought out the opportunity to have a more diverse circle? Now, don't get me wrong, because people sometimes take this as being like, well, I can't have friends that are like me. Of course you can. You can be friends with whoever you want. But think about the reason of why you might have chosen to have people that are just like you in your circle. People tend to say that diversity or that there's so much sameness, that we should focus on what we all have the same. And I disagree with that. I think that we should focus on our differences, but not in a negative way, but to celebrate them, right? So, because that's how we can learn from each other. If everything is the same, if every perspective is the same, you never grow. There's never room for change. There's never an opportunity to be able to engage in something different and new and something that might change your perspective or, push you to engage in other conversations, push you to seek out new knowledge, push you to do more. When we are always contained within that sameness, we tend to forget that there are other areas in our lives where we can expand on. And now maybe your list was scattered all over the place and you started to notice that there was a great deal of diversity in the folks that you trust. And that's wonderful. That is wonderful. Keep going. And so this isn't a means to shame people. It's just a way to reflect personally onto the way that we live our lives and why. And my guess is that the reason why you're here to listen to this conversation is that you're ready to engage in these types of conversations. And if not, well, you're here, so why not give it a try? And I'll tell you that I've done this, and I was surprised with myself that my list was had so many similarities. And so this isn't also saying a call to call every person of color that you know, every person that has a different identity than you, and beg them to be in your circle. You have to do the actual work. And that's a part of this conversation today too. And so one of the things that we need to focus on is, what's your motivation? Why are you here? Why is this important to you? And I can't answer that for you because, clearly you all have your own opinions and you all have your own ideas about that. But it is really important to focus on that. Like, what's your why? Because some whys need to be dissected a little bit. Because there is a complex right now where there are some very well-meaning, well-intentioned people that might be going about these conversations in an inappropriate way. And what I mean to say by that is, I do apologize if people get offended by the terms that I use and by what I say today. But then I ask you, why is it offensive to you? And so there is like the white savior complex that is, it is a real thing that people think that they're out here to help and save all the unfortunate people. They're here to help all of the marginalized people in our community. And while, again, those intentions are great, the result and outcome aren't always, because it's not about saving people, but it's about leveling the playing field so that people can help themselves. And that's really the disparities that we see when it comes to systemic racism, is that the opportunities aren't there for everyone to have that same playing field. Because a lot of people will say, oh, well, why aren't these folks just, pulling themselves up from their bootstraps? Or why are they not just fighting for more? And the thing that people fail to see is that sometimes folks don't have the boots to pull on the bootstraps from. We don't all start at the same playing field. And that's the reason why systemic racism is why combating systemic racism is so important, is that we're not all starting at the same place. And in order to truly be equitable, we need to be able to make those changes. And we can't, while individualized action is extremely important, until we change the systems from within, we're never going to see true change, and we're never going to see true equity. And so, again, I ask you, why are you here? And I completely understand. I have some friends who post everything on social media, everything, whether it's what they ate last night, to how amazing their garden looks, to the fact that they decided to start walking with their left foot instead of their right foot, whatever. They just tend to post things. And doing this kind of work is not about boasting. It's not about giving yourself props for all the wonderful work you did. It's not about giving yourself the kudos for joining a training, for listening in on the talk, for reaching out and asking questions. And so I just, do what you need to do to make yourself feel okay. But know that that diminishes part of the work that is being done. And because it shouldn't be about what you're doing in front of other people, it should be about how you're living your life in private. And those kind of things we don't share. And so it's important to think about that it's not about, it was the oppression Olympics is how I've heard it be called before. It's not about the oppression Olympics, about who's doing what and who is more oppressed than the others, and who has served on what committee and who has gone to what training. That's not what it should be about. You should just be doing the work to do the work because you know it's right. And I apologize, because I do know that I could come off a little bit of pushing people towards doing things, and I don't mean to, but that's something that I'm working on with myself. And that's another point, that we're all working. We are all working towards making change. We are all working towards being better, and it's a process, and we'll never be done with that work. And equity work is constantly ongoing, and what might be appropriate today might not be appropriate tomorrow. And we need to be flexible with that, and we need to be okay with making mistakes, and we need to be okay with learning from them. Excuse me. Our next step is, when you engage in these types of conversations, and when you engage in talks about racism, it's really important to approach the conversation with respect. It's not about coming in and blaming people. It's not about coming in and taking over someone's story, or even saying that you understand, right? Because if you are, and if there are people of color or that are listening, I think that this does go both ways, but I am in particular talking about the white community who comes in and is trying to engage in these conversations. And you have to be respectful and be open to listening to people's lived experiences. And I say that because a lot of times when we engage in talks of racism, then people start, as they get more comfortable, they might start sharing with you and explaining to you different situations they might have been in. And it's not your job to to apologize to them. It's not your job to try to rationalize what happened or to try to give a different viewpoint for what happened. Because the truth is that if a person of color feels that they experienced racism, that's their truth. And that's their feelings. And it's not anybody else's job to discredit that. And while the intention of the offender might not have been to be racist, the fact is that that's how it was taken. And we can all learn from that. And I will talk about intentions a lot because intentions are not everything, right? It's more about the results. And I think a lot of times people are like, they hide behind that, guys. Well, I didn't mean that. That wasn't my intention to make someone feel bad. But if you did, you need to own it, right? If you made a mistake, you need to own that and, again, learn from it. And anecdotes are important, and they help give clout to many situations. And it's not your job to try to explain away someone's situation. And now you might be someone like me who is a Latino person. If you ask me tell me about yourself, the first thing I'll say is that I'm a Latinx woman, but I look white. And so, I fall into that white passing category where I feel that I do get invited into certain places sometimes that some of my colleagues might not, some of my family might not, because of the color of my skin. And so this is not about diminishing someone's struggles, because we're not saying that people don't struggle and have their own issues to deal with. This is strictly talking about racism and how the color of your skin affects it. And so as being someone with white privilege, it's important to own that. And I do own that some doors are open for me, and my name, even Christy Walker. It's, when I walk in the room, people don't expect that Spanish was my first language. And as you get to know me, you probably start to realize that. But we need to remember that that the space that we take up is very different than the space that someone else might have. And as someone who presents as white, I know that the space that I take can sometimes be given with more authority, more respect, just more. And that's not an earned right that I have. It's a privilege that I was born into. And if you have not been born or living in the skin of someone who has been marginalized, then you will never be able to truly understand that. And that's a fact, because you will never know what it's like to be mistreated because of that. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't certain acts that do happen. So that's not taken away from that, but it's not the way that the system has been created to oppress you. So it's important to listen when you're engaging in these kind of conversations. Listen to what the other person's perspective is. One of the biggest issues in communication is that people don't listen. Like, you might be hearing what they're saying, but you might not actually be listening to what's being said. And this is really important because, in Communications 101, they tell you to actually stop, listen, nod, repeat things backwards, right? This is what we teach our children to do when they're engaging in conversations. But what most often happens is that people stop listening and they start thinking about what they're going to say next. What's going to be the next thing that they say in the argument? What's going to be something else that they can say for their point? And then at that point, we stop actively listening and stop really engaging in the conversation. And then it makes it more about you instead of the issues that we're trying to talk about. And so think about that. Like, if you can think back to conversations or times that you've been in the moment where maybe topics of racism have come up, did you allow space for the perspective? And in particular, if it's from somebody of color, right? Did you give them room to say what they needed to say without interruption, without making it about you, right? Because I have a lot of friends that go, oh, but I'm not like that. Like, I'm not saying that. We're not saying that you're like that, but the system is like that, right? And so again, it's important to really bring that attention, and maybe you could, if you're in the conversation and you notice that someone's not actively listening, a way to disrupt that is to just very easily be like, hey, did you hear what they said? Or wow, that was an interesting thing. What do you think about that? Right? Like calling attention to it and making sure that, that the people that are talking on these things are really being heard. And I've seen it happen many times where a lot of my friends or my colleagues that are people of color, it's almost like they get dismissed when they start to talk about these topics because, oh, well, here comes so and so, just going to be angry, or here comes so and so, be careful what you say, right? And I've been kind of getting that reputation a little bit about, people have to be careful what they say around me. Good. That makes me happy. If you need to be careful about what you say around me, that means that at least in that moment, you're actively thinking about if what you say is appropriate, right? And that's part of being a disruptor, is being okay with making disruptions, being okay with making waves, being okay with not being okay with the status quo. So it's also so important about doing the work, doing the research, right? Read, watch videos, participate in workshops, participate in conferences and those kind of things. But that can't be it. That can't be where it stops. There's been a lot of really great book clubs and book discussion groups, which is amazing because I think it's so important that people are taking the time to educate themselves, which is really important. But that can't be it. That shouldn't be where it stops. And I think that a friend of mine, an activist, she just said this the other day, and I want to attribute it to her, that she said, like, all these people doing this good work, but you can't just read about it. You cannot just make it about being informed and then having a discussion with probably a group of people that are similar to you. Now, are those discussion groups great? Yes. So I would never say that. I love books. I love reading. I love being informed in that way, but it's not everything, right? Are you living that life? Are you actively engaging? Are you actively participating? And I get that we don't all have the same means to, or even ability to be able to like go out. And so I'm not saying that you have to participate by marching, by holding up the signs, by being there in that way. You can be there in other ways. And that's what I want to talk about next, is that accountability. Because to make change, it can't be just when it's convenient, right? So what are you doing when you're in your small groups, right? Let's say you're with a group of friends, a group of family, and someone makes a racist joke. How do we go about moving forward with that? And I will give you an example, because humor can be a great way to deflect these kind of situations while still making an incredible point. And so, for example, there was this one Halloween where my sister and my brother-in-law and I, we were out, just out and about here in Bend, and we were just hanging out. It was a nice time, whatever. And at the end of the night, we were sitting on a bench, and some random gentleman comes up to us, a young man. He comes up to us and just starts talking to us, and he goes, "Hey, you want to hear a joke?" And we go, "Sure." Who doesn't want to hear a joke, right? And I can't remember the exact words of the joke, but he starts saying something about Asians and how Asians love rice, and it was something around that context. And we just sit there. He tells his joke, and I go, "Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I will make sure to tell that to my Japanese husband." And the guy immediately just goes like, "Oh, like, I'm not racist. I'm not racist." And I was like, "Well, I can appreciate that you're not racist, but that comment was." And he walked away. Now, I'm sure he had some choice thoughts about me in that moment, but I also can tell you that he probably is thinking about that ever since, right? Hopefully. But that's the kind of disruption that we can make that is easy and in the moment. And it was with a stranger, which is sometimes easier to do than it is with your family or close people. And so I'll give you another example. I was at a camping trip with some friends, and some really good friends, all good people. And someone started saying something about how the tubes, we were going to go to the lake, or it was a little reservoir, and how the tubes that they had to use were ghetto. And I walk up just nonchalantly to my group of friends, right? We're all camping, and I say, "Hey, is there another way that you can say that?" And they're like, "What?" And I said, "Well, you just said that the tubes are ghetto." And they're like, "Yeah, they are." And I'm just like, "Well, right. Is there another way that you can say that?" And they were just like, "Well, what do you mean?" And then we started engaging in this conversation. I said, the ghetto typically refers to an area that is undesirable. And, I just kind of gave a little bit about the history of the word. And they were just like, "Wow, yeah, I just never really thought about it like that." And so my friends were really open and they were engaging. And I said, "Can't you just say that the tubes aren't great, or that they're pretty bad, or, like, why do we have to reference things that imply a different identity?" Right? That was the point that I was trying to make. And it was great, because then we moved on. It was never brought up again. The word was never brought up again. I didn't make things weird with my group. And even if I had, because they're my friends, we would have been able to move past it. And it would have been a good learning moment with them. Now, I understand that that's not always the case with families. It's not always the case with our friends. But then I want you to consider, if someone that you're engaging with makes you feel uncomfortable because of their racist tendencies, and because of how they speak, or how they treat you, or maybe even treat some of your friends, then do their values actually line up with who you are? Is this someone that you really want to be engaging with? And I know it's very easy for me to say that, because I do understand that it is much harder to acknowledge that about people, because sometimes we end up learning things about people that we really didn't want to know. But on the other side, is that someone you want to be with? And I have lost some friends. I hate to say it, because I really value my friendships and the relationships that I've built. But I also know that I don't want to surround myself by people that are closed-minded in that thinking. And I understand that some people might be saying, like, "Oh, well, you're being closed-minded in that." But if someone doesn't align with my values, and they don't respect people's right to exist, then I'm okay with losing that friendship, right? Because it's not about right and wrong in this. It's about human dignity and about people's right to be. And judging someone based on something they had nothing to do with, for example, the color of your skin, they didn't choose that for themselves. It was what they're born into. And so judging someone based on that, there is no difference, right? Like all the things, like, historically, where people used to think that that Black people they wouldn't feel as much pain, right? Like, it's just ridiculous. Science tells us that isn't so. And if someone doesn't want to be my friend because I'm going to uphold the values that I truly believe in, again, that's okay, right? And so I do understand that I'm getting a little preachy here, and I apologize for that, but I just truly believe that people have a right to exist in any way that they choose. But I also believe that there is the human decency and human rights that we all have. And now, I don't believe that we should treat others how we want to be treated. I think that we should treat others how they want to be treated, because then it's assuming that everyone wants to be treated the way that I want to be treated. And that's not true, right? But there is, again, that societal definitions of kindness and decency. And I think sometimes we get away from that, and we just think that everyone wants to be the way that we are. And that's part of the problem, is that the dominant culture tends to look at things in that way. So I know that we've barely begun to scratch the surface on this important conversation. And so if you would like to engage, please feel free and reach out. You can find me on the COCC directory. Again, my name is Christy Walker, and my pronouns are she, her, and aya. And I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Central Oregon Community College. And I just thank you so much for taking the time to engage, to hear me out. And I look forward to continuing to grow with you all and helping to make our community a better place. And again, a big thank you to the Deschutes Public Library, in particular to Laurel, for reaching out and asking me to be a part of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for watching this program. We hope this was a good reminder of the continued work and self-reflection that is critical for all of us right now. We have a lot of wonderful programs this month that you can check out that are all engaging, free, and virtual. The monthly event guide and the event calendar, both at DeschutesLibrary.org, are great places to find upcoming programs or recorded videos. So check that out. Until next time.